Hi, everybody. So I should be up front and say I have a paralyzing fear that I was going to trip down the stage, so I'm going to set up camp down here. Welcome to Tableau Conference. You've been here for a couple days, but thought I'd say welcome as well. My name is Matt Lewandowski, and I work at a company called DEG. I'm the analytics team lead. Hopefully you guys are here to see catering to your customers at DEG, creating painless, customized mobile reporting. I tried to fit as many buzzwords as I could into my title. It seemed to have helped. So let's kick things off. That handsome devil right there is me. I'm Matt Lewandowski. As I mentioned, I work at a company called DEG. We are, stand away from the speaker. We're an advertising agency in Kansas City. So we work with a wide variety of clients, retail space, B2B. We're kind of consultants to a bunch of different things. Where we kind of carve our niche is digital marketing specifically. So as you could imagine, in the growing age, the booming of data, it's kind of our job to understand the digital side of all things marketing. So I'm tasked to know a lot about a lot. It's super fun. Okay, so let's talk about what we're going to go over today. So I'm going to begin with my journey to mobile, and spoiler alert, we bombed the first time, so we'll go over that. We're going to talk about why you guys should use alternate layouts, which, by the way, did everybody catch the mic drop this morning on automated mobile layouts? So I'm going to try and adjust accordingly as I go through these slides. They didn't give me that prep before I planned all this stuff. So fortunately, a lot of the things that we're going to go over today fit very well into the automated mobile layouts. So I'm going to go over some principles of how to design effective, scalable dashboards. The last thing that I want you guys to do when you leave this talk in particular is to think all he told us to do was to triple our efforts. One for desktop, one for tablet, one for mobile. No. The reason why you're here is because I'm going to show you in an era of desktop dashboarding, which is where most people start, how do we design our desktop dashboards to scale down very quickly for mobile devices. And then you guys will probably have questions. I hope to have answers so that this doesn't get super awkward for everybody, so I'm going to do my best. Okay, so let's talk about my journey with mobile. How many of you are familiar with a screen like this? Good. So this is our Tableau server login screen, and we were very excited when we were able to finally stand up Tableau server for the first time. In fact, we launched in January of 2017. This was going to save us a tremendous amount of time because now, instead of packaging things up for PowerPoint or sending packaged workbooks over to clients who may or may not have the accessibility to upgrade to the right Tableau reader version. How many of you guys have run into that problem? Cool. So our solution was Tableau Server. We were going to make it a browser-based platform that our clients would have one login that they could use to access all their data. So the first thing we did was we designed some super awesome dashboards. They had things like a start date and an end date. They had things like icons that were adorable and cute up in the corner that people could click on. They had KPIs. And just because we were extra fancy, they had line charts. Oh, and my favorite part, that's our logo right up there on the left. So the idea was that we were presenting this as our own summarization and aggregation of our clients' data. And so when we sent out the launch email to this dashboard in particular, and many, many more like this, we were really excited. We thought our clients were going to get a ton of value in what we were putting together. They thought that they were going to have access to data and use it all the time. It's great. It's Tableau Server. It's amazing. So what we did was we sent out a survey. And we said, hey, client who loves our product so much, why don't you tell us how awesome we are? I mean, we phrased the questions different than that. But the point is, we sent out a survey. And when I got those survey results back, I got a 4 out of 10, which for anybody who has been through middle school or high school, that's an F. We failed miserably. We did a terrible job. We were so proud of ourselves and did so poorly. My whole team was devastated. So what do you do in those situations? You look for cliche quotes that can bring meaning to your life. And that's what we did. This one from Henry Ford. But it does echo some of the sentiment that we carried through that process. So rather than view our failure as a reason to keep holding ourselves down, we saw it as an opportunity to completely scrap the whole thing and build it all over again. But this time, we wouldn't build dashboards that were built for analysts. We would build dashboards that were built for our clients. And that was the huge mistake we made. So, when we sat down in our state of humility, eating our humble pie, we decided to start with a blank canvas. We said, if we were going to put ourselves in our client's shoes, log into an environment like this, what do we want to see? And there was one critical piece that we were missing. And by the way, I just found out I have a laser pointer on this thing, so I'm going to try and spare you guys all the time, but it's mobile devices. We built everything for desktop. And truth be told, that's where the majority of people were logging in, but that's also the only place we told them to log in, was desktop. We never told them you could access it on your mobile phone because we didn't build the functionality to support it. So, when we're trying to evaluate what do we put in the mobile layouts that can help complement the dashboard pieces, I found a very disorienting GIF that I'm going to let play through twice, but it was responsive design. How many of you guys have heard of responsive design? Okay. What responsive design is it's building one website that's optimized for every device that you're on. And you can't do that exactly in Tableau, but you can mimic some of the same principles of responsive design and deploy it within your Tableau environment. And what that really means is making a conscious decision on what information to put on each device screen. There's no way you can cram everything you have in a desktop version on a mobile device. And if you ever put a table on a mobile device, I will personally flick the back of your head. So let's talk about why you should use alternate layouts. Because you guys are probably at a crossroads or have tried to cross this road before of, well, I want to go mobile, I think it's cool, but I'm not sure if my users are going to actually log in and use the material. So what I wanted to share with you guys are a couple of reasons why these alternate layouts are so immensely important to the future of your dashboarding. And it's multi-platform users. Multi-platform users have a bunch of really great charts and graphs. I cited my sources here. There's another chart and graph here that has a gradient to it. There's another chart and graph here that has multiple colors, and yet another one with pretty icons. But let me distill all that information down for you guys. Multi-platform device users make up nearly half of the online media consumption. Do you want me to prove my point? How many of you have been watching Netflix and scrolling through something on your phone? Oh, that's weird, roughly half the room. The point is, people are consuming media in tons of different ways, whether they actually tell you they are or not. And it's not like my wife and I have gotten in these arguments of put your phone down. We're watching Netflix right now. So the point here is that if you're not adapting and you're not incorporating mobile into your deployment of your dashboards and how you want people to accept it, honestly, you're missing out. The wave of people and information shifting over to mobile, we all saw the keynote, right? In terms of the different adoption of the technologies. It's happening right in front of us. Everybody has a mobile phone on them right now, and most of you also have a desktop here or a laptop. So what can we do in this world of confusing different orientations and layouts? What are some easy ways for us to start getting into the mobile ecosystem? And for me, it really comes down to a couple of things. The first is planning your dashboard. How many people would build a house without a blueprint? Nobody, right? You have to have an idea of what you want to go accomplish before you ever set out to do it. And if you've been like me and have struggled trying to build a dashboard and refine it all in the same process, you're really just causing more headache than you need. So you need to optimize every inch of screen space. Understanding what makes a desktop different than a mobile device, different from tablet, is incredible within the context of what you're building. So knowing how to take advantage of that, and that also doesn't mean cramming everything into a mobile view. What we need to do is distill the information down to the most essential. I compare it to if your boss told you to communicate the takeaway of something and gave you two formats, a Word document and a Post-it note. How would you communicate those takeaways? That's what you're effectively doing with a desktop version and a mobile version. And then last is keep it simple. There's no reason to try and overcomplicate something. The intention of mobile, if you've heard through some of the other talks here about mobile design, is to keep everything intuitive, simple, and clean. Okay, so let's talk about planning your dashboard. So like most other speakers, I like to borrow a lot of my ideas. This one is from Presentation Zen. How many people have heard of Presentation Zen? One, nice, you're my favorite. Presentation Zen is by an author named Gar Reynolds that helps you get through all the clutter of PowerPoint slides. His focus is PowerPoint. Helps get you through all the clutter and down to the essential information. And so there are a couple of things that he wants you to consider as you go through this process. One is to turn off your computer. Step away from a laptop, step away from a desktop that you have at work, and go to those good old-fashioned pen and paper or whiteboards. That's what we use at our office. It's a bunch of whiteboards. Second is to put the audience first. Talk about how we failed miserably in the launch of our Tableau server. We never put the audience first. We built things that we thought were cool, which was great to brag about, but terrible in terms of adoption. So I want to make sure that you guys don't make that same mistake. And the third one is to have a solid structure. This goes back to planning and making sure you have things together. You want to have a reference piece that you can keep coming back to and know that this is the approach that you guys are going to take moving forward. So for us, finding our creative space. This goes back to the turning off your computer. This is an actual whiteboard room. This horrible little silhouette is me taking a photo. But we have these whiteboard rooms, and you can see this is our crude and primitive versions of what we're going to do. We have things like KPIs and email and steps and things like that. And just to show you all that I'm not completely full of crap, I actually have the word audience in this screenshot. That's how important it is to me when we go through this process every single time we're designing a dashboard. So what comes next? After the ideate stage, we start to go to a proof of concept. And for us, and for one of my analysts here, Samantha Miller, she loves graph paper. She's a big nerd, but we like her. Graph paper is her jam. So she goes onto this graph paper, she sketches things out, and then she brings it to life in a proof of concept, built in Tableau. Again, we're taking something that we started out having no direction or guidance, refining it down to a view that we think will make sense, and then showing a proof of concept. So if you can get to this stage, and I know it can't happen every time, but if you can get to this proof of concept stage and present it to the person you're providing dashboards to, do you know how much time you can save yourself in refinements? So I've built proof of concepts using PowerPoint and flipping the slide and dragging different shapes and things like that. It doesn't have to be Tableau, but get some buy-in, get some feedback before you start building, because you're only going to save yourself time in the long run. Okay, and now we're going to talk about how to optimize every inch of your screen space. So this is the first iteration from our failing dashboard. After that, we took our proof of concept back to our clients, and this is what we came up with. We added new features on the left-hand side, like a menu navigation. We added little question marks so that people could hover over and have descriptions of what these areas are. I hope a lot of you guys are doing some of these concepts in your own dashboards. But the point is, before we ever went to the Tableau stage, we built out this proof of concept, gathered feedback, and figured out how do we want it to look on a desktop layout. And so if you remember this dashboard that we were so proud of that did so poorly, we went from this to this. One more time. This to this. Ooh. And the thing is, the way that we're presenting the information isn't all that radically different from A to B, especially for people who are analysts like me. You may say, well, you still have KPIs. You still have line charts. Yes, we do, but we also built on that. The first thing you'll notice is we completely stripped out the Tableau server interface. We found it distracting, and so did our clients. Having tabs up at the top wasn't helping them. It was helping us organize our information. We stripped out the content and the login because, again, we wanted it to feel like a responsive design website. We wanted people to go here and treat this like it was a data website. So we didn't want them to navigate through Tableau. And I'm not saying that's the right decision for you, but for us, that's what we came up with in our concept. And so it allowed us to present a bunch of different information. And on the left-hand side, you can see we added buttons to replace traditional tabs and things like that. Because as it turns out, if you can get someone to click on your dashboard, the adoption rate goes way up. Instead of them using tabs and instead of them navigating to content and users and things like that, finding ways to integrate URL actions on your dashboard and forcing them to interact with the content, all of a sudden brought them back and engaged them with what we were presenting to them. Are you guys fairly familiar with URL actions in here? Okay, cool. So, Matt, you're doing a talk on mobile. Stop talking about desktop. Fine. Here's what it looks like on mobile. And excuse the logo there. We call it Helix. That is our branch of our dashboarding tools. So this is the exact same underlying engine, underlying report that's driving all of this stuff. But you can see as you scroll through the mobile device, we're distilling down the information. Again, your desktop dashboards don't have to be your mobile dashboards. And in fact, they should be a very concise reconciliation of that content. What you're trying to do is present the Post-it note, not the Word document. And so for us, this was the essential. And that really goes back to what we decided to offer up as a comprehensive solution. Because you're going to have people who are going to ask you, I had this thing on my desktop version that I'm not seeing on my phone. Take it as feedback, because if you hear that enough, you may want to incorporate that into your mobile layouts. But if you can tell them, well, they serve different purposes. This one, on our desktop instance, is meant for exploratory analysis. I want you to click. I want you to filter. I want you to do all these things. The mobile view, you should be able to, we have a rule, a design rule, that if our client can't find what they're looking for in 3 taps on their phone or less, we need to completely redesign the mobile thing. Because they don't have time, nor do they care enough to comb through. Do you guys remember those god-awful websites that when you loaded it up on your phone, you had to scroll to the left and then scroll down because the website wasn't built for mobile? You can't do that with your dashboards either. You have to distill the information down. And that brings us to our last step here. Keep it simple. Don't overthink what you're doing. If you guys like The Office, so do I, if you can't tell. This cracks me up when I reference this quote, but it's so true, you know, and of course this is the comedic spin on that. But a lot of times you're trying to do something impressive, and I go back to some of the sentiment of the earlier iPhone developments and the earlier tablet developments, and Apple had this philosophy that if a group of toddlers couldn't figure out how to operate the device, it was too complex. I hope you guys aren't building dashboards for toddlers. I don't know what you do for a living. You certainly don't have to follow that to a T, but the idea here is don't overthink it, and don't try and overcomplicate a situation. Consider it an opportunity for feedback. People will tell you what's missing. Turns out people love telling you everything that's wrong with your work. So they'll let you know, and it's your job to listen and distill that information into something meaningful, but you have to keep it simple. And so for me, that comes down to 2 different things: some general guidelines and some design tactics. So from a general standpoint, you always want to keep that user experience first, and upfront. If you're not designing for your user, who are you designing it for? That should always be the first thing you're thinking about. Simplicity is your friend. Again, don't overcomplicate it. Make it simple, make it intuitive. Make the buttons on your mobile layout big enough so people can actually tap on them. That was a hilarious misnomer on our first mobile dashboards. The button was like this tiny. People couldn't even see it. Avoid busy visuals. So this could be scatter plots. They're really great for tablet layouts or maybe a desktop, but scatter plots in general have a lot of different data points tied to them and can be somewhat distracting. So while it is visually impressive, it's probably not the most meaningful way to represent that data. So tactically, how do we do that? Use containers. Do people in here, does everybody use containers? It's okay, I'm not gonna make fun of you if you don't. But the point is, floating layouts do not work when you're scaling it. Floating elements of your dashboard. They're a quick fix, but they're not your long-term solution. Because even an iPhone and a Samsung Galaxy render differently on mobile due to their pixel density. So when you drag and drop something that's floating, it's gonna look in place on one mobile device and out of place on another. Please don't ever use them. Use URL actions. This goes back to user adoption and engagement. Use interactions that help your users figure out how to interact with the information you're putting in front of them. Don't take them back to the Tableau experience, in our case, because that brought them out of the data. That brought them out of the dashboard. So for us, we stripped it down and used URL actions. And that comes back to using query parameters. I'm not saying this is the right decision for you guys, but for us, and especially in a mobile layout, if you strip out the Tableau interface, you can actually just shoot them a URL to your dashboard on your mobile phone, and without the app, they can log in. And then all of a sudden, the Tableau interface is out of the mobile device, and it just loads up in full screen on your mobile phone. Found that out by accident. I'd love to say I was a genius and knew that the whole time, but I didn't. So for us, when you use the query parameters that are available in Tableau, you can show and hide different elements of your Tableau server. So for instance, the top menu navigation, there's a query parameter that will actually hide that from the browser. And so for us, once we stripped out all of the Tableau server UI, we could then just shoot a link with those query parameters to our clients, and the dashboard would load up in full screen. And then it would look like ours and not like Tableau's. And then leverage parameters for user input. And what I mean by that is, if you're gonna throw a line chart out there, I'm not a fan of showing 5 different versions of a line chart. Maybe that's the right decision. It depends on your type of analysis. But for us, using different KPIs to toggle what's visible. So in an email sense, you have an open rate and a click-through rate. I'm not gonna build 2 different versions of that. I'm gonna use parameters to select which KPI I wanna make visible. So do you guys want to see a demo of everything? Okay, cool. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to show you is that same dashboard that we had on a slide just a moment ago. So you can see this should be roughly the same thing that you saw visible within that slide. And I'm going to show you, as we go through these things, the different elements that we chose to cut as part of our mobile layouts. So for us, when we're establishing a desktop view, we want to include pretty much everything. That's the most screen space we're ever going to deal with. And I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this one, because I know you guys are probably all using desktop layouts. But the reason why I bring it up is because it's really important to understand what could be noise and what is meaningful, especially when we're trying to distill all that information down. So right now we have some navigation to toggle left and right. You can see we've got some hover details that explain different elements on the chart. And it's great when you have a lot of screen space to work with to have everything you can at your disposal to have these different elements. But as we move to the tablet version, you can see the shift. Those question marks aren't available anymore. Those arrows are gone. And instead of a table at the bottom or a crosstab, we have a simple bar chart that displays some of the same KPIs. Everybody following? Nice. So that gets especially refined when we go down to the mobile layout. So in a mobile layout, the most number of columns you should ever implement in a mobile layout are 2. Please don't ever use more than 2 columns in any sort of mobile design. So you can see as we scroll through this experience, what we've done is we've started to take some of the same essential elements, stack them vertically, because that's how people interact with your phone. We're going to do a little social experiment right now. I want everybody to take out their phone and hold it in their hand. How are you holding your phone? Is it portrait or is it landscape? Right. So anybody that uses social media, anybody that uses their different apps like Photos or their browser, I don't see a ton of people walking up and down the hallways like this unless they're watching videos. And someone who's watching videos and walking at the same time should just stand off to the side. I think we all can agree on that. But the point is, even the Tableau app that you guys are using every day this week, you hold your phone in portrait mode. So build your design to support that. It's okay if you guys want to build things in landscape, but understand, again, put your audience first. Understand how they're going to consume the content. And the first person that comes to you and says, this mobile dashboard is crap, it looks awful in landscape, you guys can personally email me, and I'll write back to that one person to help resolve that issue for you guys. But the idea here is that going back from our desktop version down to our mobile, you can see we've just hand-selected 4 KPIs rather than having 5. We've eliminated the line chart, and we borrowed the same bar chart from the tablet mode. I don't want you to rebuild things. I want you to repurpose things. And that's the difference when you're trying to make these effective and scalable. So, keeping the user experience intact, here's my pretty version of what we're going to walk through. So right now, this is the default mode. Everybody's familiar with default, right? That's just what you get. So we haven't added any mobile layouts yet, but what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go from this to a tablet version to a mobile version right now in front of you guys. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go to desktop mode. And typically when I'm building desktop, it's really down to 2 different decisions. One is going to be to fit all, and one's going to be to fit with. And my preference always is to fit all, so that you guys can keep everything within one screen. But I understand that doesn't work all the time, so at least do a fit with. Make sure that your desktop dashboard is going the entire width of the screen. But what we want to focus on today is tablet. And this is too much. Look at what happened at the bottom in a tablet version. Those charts got squished. Because what Tableau does when you're building these alternate layouts is it builds from the top down. So what I've done is I've fixed this height of all these different sections, and these bottom charts are at the mercy of what's above them. So what we're going to do is we're going to distill down the information. I'm also a fairly organized individual. Some people call it OCD. I just like to care a lot, I think. So what I have done is put a bunch of different containers in here that are going to help me transform this very, very quickly. So right now what I've done is I've selected this vertical container. Imagine that was our section that had the arrows and the question marks that you saw on the previous dashboard. By selecting that whole container, within one click, I can reduce those down. Those were 4 or 5 different elements that all had different widths and things like that, but I put them all in the container, and when I go to the tablet mode, I can very quickly eliminate some of those things. So within this vertical stack, I've got these horizontal KPIs, and I've got things like my header, things like my line chart. In these examples, I don't necessarily need them to be in containers. And for us, what did I say? When should you include tables? Don't ever include them on mobile layouts. So this is our tablet version. So you can see in the span of about, 30 seconds, I went from my full desktop layout and I reduced down the noise to what was the essential on our tablet layout. Make sense? I'm going to interpret nodding heads as a good thing. I also am like a nervous speaker. If people don't respond to what I'm saying, I just tend to keep talking. Okay, so now we're going to go to a phone layout. And this is where it gets a little bit tricky, but it's not impossible. And so we're going to do the same couple of first steps. I'm going to free up some room here so I can actually see what I'm doing. I'm going to get rid of my question marks. And now I've got a couple of things that are very similar to that tablet layout. I want to make sure we're doing okay on time. And so for me, what I'm going to end up doing is I need my menu to exist, but I want that to come up here into the vertical layout. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to fit width. So you can see now we're not finished, but it's starting to take shape. Because what you want to do in a mobile layout is get everything within a vertical stretch. And the one thing that I told you guys that you should do is only have 2 columns, right? So we have a big problem right now with our 5 KPIs that are there. But the rest of this is starting to look like a pretty decent mobile layout. So in here, we're going to get rid of that same line chart in the corresponding header. We're also going to get rid of that table. I think I've made my point redundant by now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add another horizontal container in here. And I'm going to take 2 of these KPIs, drop them in here. And for me on this horizontal, I'm going to do something like edit the height to be 200 so that it starts to look like some of the other ones. And for us, because we had decided 4 KPIs was going to be our focal point, distilling that information down, we're going to get rid of that last one. And now you've got a pretty functional mobile layout. And again, I only spent maybe a minute transforming this down. Make good use of your default layouts. Make sure you have everything that you need, and then just cut out the noise. Any questions on this one? Nice. Crushed it. Okay. Yeah. So for me, what I tend to do is I don't focus a lot on the individual phone size, just because the use of containers and making everything to be filling the entire width is going to more or less fill that screen space. And that's a lot of the reason why when we pick tablet versions, we do things like fit all for the whole tablet layout. In this mobile layout, it doesn't matter what the actual pixel density is of the phone because I've chosen to fit width. And within the containers themselves, they're going to keep expanding. And so what you're doing is you're creating a relationship within that workspace to just always divide in half. And that goes back to that concept of responsive design. So not every browser window is going to be opened at exactly the same pixel width. So trying to design and iterate for all the different permutations of that is only going to make you lose hair that much faster. You know, what you can do is just sort of take some of the core concepts there and work with what you have to expand and fill that space. Yeah. It does in our case, yeah. So that's something that you can adjust, is the height of it. So for us, what you're wanting to do in this particular case, I've chosen 1100 pixels, as you can see right here on the height. But what you want to make sure in your particular instance is relative to the amount of content that you're putting within there. If I had a couple of other things that I wanted to display within this dashboard, I could extend the height without really worrying too much about the width. Yeah, so when it comes to like determining priorities of what you're showcasing, so we're finding that a lot of our customers, The more ingrained they are, the more hooks you can create, like these clicking on the actual dashboard, the more that you can get them there. But very obviously, the content that is most important should always go on top, because that's the first thing someone's going to see. So as you go through here, for us, even at the height of this, you can see the box that's drawn out here. I have enough room to include my header and then some of the initial KPIs that were determined to be the most essential within the mobile layout. Things like a bar chart that you saw on the other mobile layout is for those people who do make it further down, but if I have to choose between the KPIs and the bar chart, what's going to be viewed most, it's always going to go for us on those KPIs, and that's determined by the survey feedback that we got when we're doing that. So the most important information should always go to the top, but you also need to balance that with what's telling the story of your data. So in mobile, your story is not as robust, but make sure you're putting it in a sequence that makes sense, and within that sequence, what's most important. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. In that particular instance, I don't know if I would implement that on our team, simply because you can't determine the exact height, and in that case where you're trying to, so this, we have a fixed height that spans beyond the height of the physical screen. So for instance, my wife's iPhone 8 has a different height and dimension to it than my iPhone 10 that doesn't have the button on the bottom. So for us, I can't really control the height of the screen, so you can fit it, like you're saying, on one screen and then encourage them to click through. For us, we would rather put the focal points within the dashboard layout and then get them to navigate to different pages. So it's certainly a design preference and what you want. If you want them to have no other context than the one viz that you're putting within the view, I think that makes complete sense. For our particular instance, what we're doing is we're showing some teaser KPIs and saying things like, we're up 20%, scroll down to see what impacted that kind of thing. All right. So again, going back to the three things that we wanted to cover off on today. So if you learn nothing else, learn these three things. Plan your dashboard, optimize the screen space that you have, and keep it simple. I think you guys saw through some of those examples the complexity of our dashboard layouts in desktop mode and how we kind of scaled down for tablet. But as you go forward and as you determine whether or not mobile is worth pursuing, the things I can leave you with is the audience is growing the most in mobile right now. And if you're not at least planning on addressing that with your team, you need to start thinking about these three things. So any questions? Yeah?
A large set of our user base are salespeople
Mm-hmm.
who we're trying to show them information regarding their sales, and they are strictly mobile user friendly.
Mm-hmm.
Access to the desktop, they don't maybe desktop. And I find myself having to use table layouts in the phone because they want all of the information on a single line item. Like, hey, I want the order number, I want the customer name, I want the customer location, I want to know how much money I sold them for. Like,
Mm-hmm.
it is a ton of information, and they want it on the phone.
Yeah.
So I don't know the best way to give someone 30 rows of data with, 10 columns of, fields that
Yeah.
they want to see on the phone. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah. So the ways that we've navigated that, and I don't know every instance of your scenario, but the ways, so we have a very similar approach for Salesforce CRM, right? So there's lots of aggregated metrics within Salesforce, but sometimes people just want to know customer performance on different metrics and drill into that specific detail. So we've chosen to take advantage a lot of the viz within a viz. So the idea of building a worksheet and embedding it in the tooltip so that if they click on something, they can see additional detail. What we've also done is allowed a full click out because if you're in a browser, everything else is just a back button. So if I click into a report that is focused on that customer, that's essentially a mobile view of just that customer, they can just click the back button on their browser to return back to that screen. And that seems to have worked to some capacity for the majority of people. Of course, we're not addressing or answering everything within that user group, but for us, what we're doing is essentially taking our design process and chipping away as much as we can reasonably. And then at the end of the day, what we do is we just automate out an Excel file for those particular things that get delivered every Monday so that they can reference that. But we've found that the use of physically touching the dashboards that they're using on their mobile phone and being able to drill down into a filtered view has been helpful in our situation. And that all started with the viz within a viz. So being able to click on a bar graph and see a customer breakout for that particular thing. So there is no one size catches all for that type of granularity, but there are things you can do to help mediate that, I would say. Yeah?
So it sounds like you're not using a mobile app yourself.
No, am I allowed to say this at this conference? We didn't like the use of the mobile app just because it required our customers to download a mobile app that they weren't familiar with. And in the essence of stripping away the Tableau UI, the first thing that hits you in the mobile app is the Tableau UI. And so for us, it was a lot easier. And again, that was kind of discovered by accident for us and stripping away all those things and then just trying it out on our phone. So for us, it didn't fit our needs. And I'm not saying that doesn't fit the needs of other people, but we wanted to keep it simple and intuitive. And we found that incorporating a Tableau mobile app, one, not everybody had the ability to upgrade with the different versions of mobile apps. It's the same reason why we stopped trying to send packaged Tableau reader files, because we have people who have these firewalls that can't download software on their own machines. So for us, we wanted to keep it all browser-based so that anybody on any internet browser, Safari or Chrome, respectively, could access it with one username, one password, and have everything they needed.
Why don't you explain how you do that? Get rid of all the Tableau stuff.
Yeah.
Is there a place, how do you find it? Where do we find that?
Yeah, I can, when I go to send off all this information, one, I could show you after we're done if you'd like, and two, I can incorporate. Tableau has a lot of documentation. If you just search Tableau query parameters, they have lots and lots of really helpful information on things that you can hide or move around within the screen. Yeah, so us kind of stumbling upon that content ended up being super, super helpful. Do you have a question back there? We abandoned the mobile app pretty early on. So I could tell you a lot about the mobile browsers. I couldn't tell you a lot about the app. And I also have not explored the beta version of the mobile app that's coming out. I don't even know if that's totally available to everybody. I still have it installed on my phone, and I check back periodically to see how it maneuvers and things like that, but that just became kind of like a pretty early decision for us to kind of cut out the app. Yeah. We've done both. Our data sets are fairly aggregated to begin with. You know, we certainly capture the minute detail in the large data sets there, but we also use Alteryx with our environment to serve as an aggregation tool, among other things. But yeah, I've done instances where I've done several 100,000 rows worth of data surfacing in there, and it seems to work just fine. But I haven't quite I have some clients who are working with 40 million records within a data set, and I don't do a mobile version for that before I aggregate, that type of thing. Yeah? The authentication for the logging in on mobile. Just in your browser, just like you do on your desktop, it'll just ask for a username and a password. And as long as you sent them the link to the dashboard, as opposed to like the link to just the landing page or things like that, if you send them a link to the dashboard, it'll say, first, give me your username and password, and they'll hit enter, and then it'll load up on their phone. Yeah, it'd be the same Tableau server credentials that they have for any of the other devices they use. Yeah, they're hitting our Tableau server directly in that instance. Yeah. Any other questions?
So you had different dashboards.
Uh-huh.
Each have different things. So when you're in the mobile app, how are you getting to those?
With
Swipe from one to the other, or do they?
Oh, yeah. So just like we had on the menu navigation, we would include that in the header and in the footer of our mobile dashboards. So that by the time you reach the bottom, you could navigate to another, you would use another URL action to shoot them off to another version of that. So we're actually doing button clicks within the mobile layout.
So then would it open in your browser window, or would it go there in the same?
Using query parameters, you can keep them in the same browser window. Yeah. So, yeah, because that was originally the first frustration I had, was I built buttons, but they were kicking them out to a new tab every time, and I didn't like that as a user experience. So that's what led me to the query parameters. And there's a simple query parameter that you can tack on to the end of your URL that keeps it within the same window. It's pretty cool. Yes. Yeah, so minimum 12. Don't ever go smaller than 12. And the other thing is that, especially if you're using mobile browsers like we do, I actually don't design with the Tableau book font. I design with Ariel, and I know that that's not the prettiest font in the world, but it is the most universal font. So Arial 12 is the lowest I would go. You can use bigger, but there's design sacrifices to have a size 72 font on there. So it's just like any other font. It would have to be loaded on the individual machine to show it that way. So that's why we chose to go with Arial for all of our designs. Again, I wish I could do something prettier. Yeah.
You ever run into a situation where you might have the same visualization on both your desktop and your mobile, but you want them to display in very different ways? So maybe on the desktop it's a line, but on the mobile you want it to be a bar. How do you work around that?
So I kind of have an example similar to that. So in the desktop version of what you saw, we had a crosstab that had what it does is it summarizes in emails instance, when you send out an email, it summarizes the performance of that one email down to an open rate or the revenue it led to or whatever. And so for us, when we switch over to tablet and mobile, that's why we represent it as a bar chart instead of a table, because we don't have that screen space to work with. So I would imagine it would work similarly if you're trying to do a bar chart versus a line chart. You would just have to, in your default view when you're building it, that's why you use, again, containers are so important as part of this approach, because you would put both of those in your default view and then just only add or remove the one that you wanted for each of those versions. That's why when we were scaling down, I deleted out some of the things like the crosstabs. Does that answer your question? Okay. Anything else? Cool. Well, feel free to give me a survey if you're going to give out all fives. Otherwise, feel free to put your phone back in your pocket. No, if this was helpful, feel free to come up and talk to me, ask me any additional questions that you guys may have. I hope you can also implement mobile into your own workflows and things like that, because the wave is coming, and you've seen Tableau themselves put put such a huge emphasis on it with the automatic mobile layouts. So it's something that's near and dear to my heart. So if you guys have any questions, feel free to come up and ask. Thank you.